The yellow taser crackled with electricity as Officer Patricia Brennan aimed it at 9-year-old Jamir Washington's chest. The fluorescent lights of Roosevelt Elementary's hallway cast harsh shadows across her face, transforming her features into something predatory and cruel. Teachers pressed themselves against lockers, cell phones raised, fingers trembling as they recorded the unthinkable scene unfolding before their eyes. I said, "Get on the ground. Boy." Brennan's voice echoed off the polished linoleum floors, bouncing between trophy cases and bulletin boards decorated with children's artwork. Her hand gripped the weapon with practiced ease, the same hand that had written countless traffic tickets and filed dozens of incident reports, now threatening a child who barely reached her shoulder. Jamir stood frozen, his small frame dwarfed by the intimidating figure before him. His backpack, adorned with patches from the National Honor Society Junior Chapter and a Future Leader badge, hung loosely from one shoulder. Tears pooled in his dark eyes, but he refused to let them fall. He had done nothing wrong. Nothing. The morning had started like any other for Jamir Washington. He woke at 6:30 sharp, made his bed with military precision, and helped his younger sister Maya with her cereal before their grandmother drove them to school. Jamir loved Roosevelt Elementary, with its red brick facade and towering oak trees that provided shade during lunch recess. He loved his third-grade classroom with Mrs. Peterson, who always encouraged him to reach higher, dream bigger, and never settle for less than his best. Jamir was the kind of student teachers bragged about in the faculty lounge. He turned in assignments early, helped struggling classmates with their math problems, and never missed a day of school unless he was genuinely ill. His mother had instilled in him the importance of education, responsibility, and respect for authority. She worked long hours, often leaving before dawn and returning after dinner. But she never failed to check his homework or listen to his stories about school. The trouble began during third-period math when Mrs. Peterson noticed Jamir looking at Tommy Chen's paper during a quiz on multiplication tables. She called him to her desk after class, her voice gentle but concerned. "Jamir, honey, I saw you looking at Tommy's work during the quiz. Can you tell me what happened?" His face flushed with embarrassment as he explained, "I wasn't cheating. Mrs. Peterson, I promise. Tommy dropped his eraser, and I was just trying to help him find it. I looked over to see where it rolled, and I guess I accidentally saw his paper. I'm sorry." Mrs. Peterson smiled warmly. She had taught for 23 years and could distinguish between intentional cheating and innocent accidents. "I believe you, sweetheart. But we need to be extra careful during tests. Okay, next time. Just raise your hand and I'll help." "Yes, ma'am," Jamir replied, relief washing over his face. Mrs. Peterson made a note in her gradebook about the incident, following district protocol for any testing irregularity, no matter how minor. The note was meant to document her conversation with Jamir. Nothing more. She had no way of knowing that this simple documentation would trigger a chain of events that would shake Roosevelt Elementary to its core. Principal Martinez received the routine report during lunch and, following the new district guidelines implemented after several high-profile academic integrity cases, decided to call Jamir to his office for a formal discussion. The boy arrived promptly, his honor roll certificate still fresh in his mind from the previous week's assembly. "Jamir, son, Mrs. Peterson sent me a note about the quiz today. I want to hear your side of the story." Principal Martinez had known Jamir since kindergarten and had never had cause for concern about the boy's character or behavior. Jamir repeated his explanation, his voice steady and clear. Principal Martinez nodded, satisfied with the boy's honesty and obvious remorse over the misunderstanding. He was preparing to send Jamir back to class with a gentle reminder about test-taking protocols when Officer Brennan appeared in his doorway. Patricia Brennan had been Roosevelt Elementary's school resource officer for 3 years. Assigned to the position after a series of complaints about her aggressive tactics during traffic stops. The district thought a school environment might soften her approach, provide her with positive interactions with young people, and rehabilitate her image within the community. They were wrong. Brennan thrived on confrontation and saw defiance in every interaction. Even with children, she interpreted a student's nervous giggle as disrespect, a dropped backpack as deliberate disruption, and any question of her authority as grounds for escalation. Teachers had complained about her methods, but their concerns fell on deaf ears. The district was too invested in their decision to admit their mistake. "What's the situation here?" Brennan demanded, stepping into Principal Martinez's office without invitation. Her utility belt, laden with handcuffs, pepper spray, and the yellow taser that would soon terrorize a 9-year-old, creaked with each step. "Officer Brennan, this is just a routine conversation about a testing incident. Nothing that requires—" "Academic fraud is a serious matter. Martinez, I'll handle this." Brennan's interruption carried the weight of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. She turned her attention to Jamir, who sat quietly in the chair across from the principal's desk. "So you were cheating. Were you?" Brennan's voice dripped with accusation and disgust. "No, ma'am. I wasn't cheating. I was just—" "Don't lie to me. Boy, I read the report. You were looking at another student's paper during a test. That's cheating in my book." Principal Martinez tried to intervene. "Officer Brennan, please." This was clearly an accident. Mrs. Peterson confirmed that Jamir was helping another student retrieve a dropped eraser. "There's no need for—" "There's every need. Martinez, these kids need to learn that actions have consequences. Academic integrity starts young, and I'm here to make sure this one learns his lesson." Jamir's hands began to tremble as Officer Brennan's voice grew louder and more threatening. He had never been in trouble at school, never even received a warning from a teacher. The woman standing before him seemed to radiate hostility, her eyes cold and calculating as she studied him like a predator, sizing up prey. "Stand up," Brennan commanded. Jamir looked to Principal Martinez, who nodded reluctantly. The boy stood slowly, his small frame appearing even more diminutive next to the imposing officer. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." "Officer Brennan, this is completely unnecessary. Jamir is a model student who—" "I said turn around!" Brennan's voice boomed through the office, causing Jamir to flinch violently. "You're being detained for questioning regarding academic fraud." Tears finally began to flow down Jamir's cheeks as he slowly turned around. This couldn't be happening. He was a good kid. He helped his grandmother with groceries, read to his little sister every night, and had never broken a rule in his entire life. The injustice of the situation crashed over him like a wave, leaving him gasping for breath. "I didn't do anything wrong," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "What did you say?" Brennan grabbed Jamir's shoulder, spinning him around roughly. "Did you just talk back to me?" I just said I didn't do anything wrong. I wasn't cheating, I promise." Brennan's face twisted with rage. In Jamir's quiet protest, she heard defiance. In his tears, she saw manipulation. In his trembling voice, she detected the seeds of future rebellion that needed to be crushed immediately and thoroughly. "That's it. You're coming with me." Brennan grabbed Jamir's arm with one hand, while reaching for her handcuffs with the other. Principal Martinez jumped from his chair. "Officer Brennan, stop. This is a 9-year-old child. You cannot arrest him for alleged academic dishonesty, especially when we've established that no dishonesty occurred." "I can, and I will." This little punk needs to learn respect for authority. Brennan's grip tightened on Jamir's arm, causing him to cry out in pain. The sound of a child's distress echoed through the thin walls of the principal's office, reaching the ears of Mrs. Chenyars, the school secretary, who immediately called security and began alerting other staff members. Within minutes, teachers began gathering in the hallway outside Principal Martinez's office, their faces etched with concern and disbelief. Ms. Rodriguez, the school counselor, pushed through the growing crowd and entered the office. "What's happening here?" I can hear shouting from down the hall. "Officer Brennan is attempting to arrest Jamir for an incident that we've already determined was accidental," Principal Martinez explained, his voice tight with frustration and growing anger. "You're all enabling this delinquent behavior," Brennan snapped. "This kid needs to face consequences for his actions, and if you won't provide them, I will." Ms. Rodriguez knelt beside Jamir, her voice gentle and soothing. "Honey, are you okay? You're safe now." Brennan yanked Jamir away from the counselor. "Don't interfere with police business." "This isn't police business." Ms. Rodriguez stood, her protective instincts fully activated. "This is child abuse." The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Child abuse. The accusation seemed to trigger something primal in Officer Brennan, a rage that had been simmering beneath the surface for years. She released Jamir's arm and stepped back, her hand moving instinctively to her weapon belt. "You want to see police business? I'll show you police business." Brennan's hand closed around her taser, the yellow plastic warm from the heat of her body. "This little criminal is going to learn what happens when you disrespect law enforcement." Principal Martinez moved to position himself between Brennan and Jamir. But the officer was faster. She drew her taser with practiced efficiency, the distinctive whine of charging capacitors filling the small office as she activated the weapon. "Get out of my way, Martinez, or you'll be next." The principal raised his hand slowly, his voice calm but firm. "Officer Brennan, put the weapon down. This is a school, not a war zone. That's a child, not a criminal." "Move!" Brennan screamed, spittle flying from her lips as she advanced toward Jamir, who had backed against the wall, his small hands pressed flat against the painted cinder blocks. Ms. Rodriguez grabbed her cell phone and began recording, her hands shaking as she documented the unthinkable scene. "This is Ms. Rodriguez at Roosevelt Elementary. We have an officer threatening a student with a taser. We need immediate assistance." The commotion had drawn nearly a dozen teachers into the hallway, and several had begun recording the incident through the office's glass door. Their faces reflected a mixture of horror, disbelief, and protective fury as they watched one of their students being terrorized by the very person meant to keep him safe. Mrs. Patterson, Jamir's first-grade teacher, pushed through the crowd. "That's my baby," she cried, referring to Jamir with the affection teachers reserve for students who hold special places in their hearts. "Someone stop her before she hurts him." The crowd of educators pressed closer to the office, their collective presence creating a wall of witnesses that Officer Brennan could not ignore. Phone cameras captured her every move, documenting her threats and Jamir's terror for posterity. The incident was already spreading beyond the school walls as teachers sent messages to parents, administrators, and local news outlets. Brennan seemed to feed off the attention, her behavior becoming more erratic and dangerous with each passing moment. She forced Jamir out of the principal's office and into the hallway, the taser still trained on his small chest. "Everyone back away, or I'll tase this little criminal right here," she announced to the horrified crowd of teachers. Mrs. Thompson, the kindergarten teacher who had taught Jamir's sister Maya, stepped forward despite the threat. "Officer Brennan, please, You're scaring him. Look at him. He's just a baby." Jamir stood trembling in the center of the hallway, surrounded by his teachers and the woman who seemed determined to destroy his innocence. His honor roll pin caught the fluorescent light, a small reminder of his academic achievements that now seemed meaningless in the face of such injustice. "I want my mama," he whispered, the words barely audible, but carrying the weight of a child's complete vulnerability. Brennan laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the hallway walls. "Your mama can't save you now. Boy, you should have thought about consequences before you decided to cheat and then lie about it." Unknown to everyone present, Jamir's mother was already on her way to the school. Dr. Keisha Washington had received the emergency call from her assistant while reviewing budget proposals in her office at the district headquarters. As the district superintendent, she managed 47 schools and nearly 30,000 students. But none of that mattered when her child was in danger. Dr. Washington had built her career on a foundation of educational excellence and unwavering advocacy for students. She had fought budget battles to ensure adequate resources for schools, implemented anti-bullying programs that became models for other districts, and maintained an open-door policy that encouraged parents to bring their concerns directly to her attention. But she had never imagined that her own child would become a victim of the very system she worked tirelessly to improve. The phone call from Ms. Rodriguez had been brief, but terrifying. "Dr. Washington, you need to get to Roosevelt Elementary immediately. Officer Brennan has a taser pointed at Jamir." Dr. Washington's hands shook as she grabbed her keys and rushed from her office, her high heels clicking against the marble floors of the administration building. Her mind raced with questions and fears as she navigated the short drive to her son's school. How had a routine conversation about a testing incident escalated to this point? How had the woman she had personally approved for the school resource officer position transformed into a threat to her child's safety? Meanwhile, at Roosevelt Elementary, the standoff continued. Officer Brennan maintained her threatening posture, while teachers formed a protective semicircle around Jamir. Their presence, a silent but powerful statement of support for their student. "This is ridiculous," declared Mr. Franklin, the fifth-grade teacher who had coached Jamir in the school's math competition team. "Officer Brennan, you're traumatizing this child over nothing. Mrs. Peterson already confirmed that Jamir wasn't cheating." "I don't care what Peterson says. I saw the report. This kid was looking at another student's paper during a test. That's academic fraud, and I'm going to make sure he faces appropriate consequences." Mrs. Peterson herself arrived at the scene, having been summoned from her classroom by the emergency notification system. Her face went pale as she saw Jamir standing in the hallway with a weapon pointed at him. "Officer Brennan, I wrote that report. Jamir was helping another student find a dropped eraser. There was no cheating, no fraud, no misconduct of any kind. This is a complete misunderstanding." "Save it. Peterson, you teachers are all the same, making excuses for these kids instead of holding them accountable." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of high heels clicking rapidly down the hallway. Every head turned toward the sound, teachers parting like the Red Sea as Dr. Keisha Washington rounded the corner. She was an imposing figure, even without her title. Standing nearly 6 feet tall with natural hair, pulled back in a professional bun, and wearing a navy blue suit that commanded respect. But it was her eyes that truly commanded attention. They blazed with a fury that seemed to burn through the air itself, focused entirely on the woman threatening her child with a weapon designed to incapacitate adults. Dr. Washington had faced down hostile school boards, angry parents, and political opponents throughout her career, but none of those battles had prepared her for this moment. "Mama!" Jamir cried out, relief and fear mixing in his voice as he saw his mother approaching. Officer Brennan turned toward the new arrival, her taser still trained on Jamir. "Ma'am, you need to stay back. This is a police matter." Dr. Washington stopped several feet away, her trained eye taking in every detail of the scene. Her son, terrified and trembling, stood in the center of the hallway with a weapon pointed at his chest. His teachers surrounded him like guardian angels, their faces reflecting the protective love they felt for their students. And there, holding the instrument of terror, stood Officer Patricia Brennan. "I am Dr. Keisha Washington," she announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "I am this child's mother, and I am the superintendent of this school district." The words hit Officer Brennan like a physical blow. The confident smirk disappeared from her face, replaced by a look of dawning realization and growing panic. She had just threatened the district superintendent's child with a weapon. She had terrorized the son of the most powerful education official in the county. "Ma'am, the child was involved in academic fraud and—" "Lower your weapon, now." Dr. Washington's command carried the weight of absolute authority. "You have exactly 3 seconds to put that taser away before I have you arrested for assault on a minor." Brennan's hand trembled as she slowly lowered the taser, the reality of her situation crashing down upon her like an avalanche. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, threatened a child in front of dozens of witnesses, and now faced the wrath of the most influential educator in the district. Dr. Washington moved past Brennan without a second glance and knelt beside her son, gathering him into her arms as he collapsed against her chest in relief. Jamir's tears soaked through her suit jacket as she whispered reassurances in his ear, her own voice thick with emotion. "It's okay, baby. Mama's here. You're safe now." As she held her son. Dr. Washington's mind was already working, processing the implications of what had just occurred and formulating a response that would ensure this never happened again. She had built her career on protecting children, and now she would use every tool at her disposal to protect not just her son, but every student in the district. "Mrs. Chen," she called to the school secretary, her voice calm but carrying unmistakable authority. "Please call district security and have them escort Officer Brennan from the premises immediately. Then contact the school board and arrange an emergency meeting for this afternoon." She turned to Principal Martinez, who stood nearby with a mixture of relief and apprehension on his face. "Mr. Martinez, I want a full written report of this incident on my desk within the hour. Include statements from every witness and copies of all video recordings." Officer Brennan stood frozen in place, apparently unable to process the rapid change in her circumstances. The hallway that had moments before been her domain now felt like a courtroom where she stood as the accused, surrounded by hostile faces and damning evidence. "Dr. Washington, please. I was just doing my job. The boy was involved in academic dishonesty and—" "Your job, doctor." Washington's voice cut through Brennan's explanation like a blade. "Your job is to protect children, not terrorize them. Your job is to serve this community, not traumatize its most vulnerable members." She stood slowly, keeping one protective arm around Jamir, while facing the woman who had caused so much harm. "Officer Brennan, you are suspended from duty, effective immediately. You will surrender your badge, your weapon, and your access credentials to district security when they arrive." District security arrived within minutes, responding to the emergency call with the seriousness the situation demanded. Officer Brennan was escorted from the building in front of the gathered teachers and students, her head down and her career in ruins. Dr. Washington remained in the hallway long after Brennan's departure, holding her son and speaking quietly with the teachers who had protected him. Their actions had been heroic, standing between a child and an armed adult despite the personal risk to themselves. "Thank you," she said to each of them individually, her gratitude evident in every word. "Thank you for protecting my son. Thank you for being the educators our children deserve." As the crowd of teachers began to disperse, returning to their classrooms and their duties, Dr. Washington made a decision that would transform Roosevelt Elementary and serve as a model for schools throughout the district. "Mr. Martinez, I want to address the entire school. Can you arrange for an assembly in the gymnasium?" 30 minutes later, every student and staff member at Roosevelt Elementary gathered in the gymnasium. Dr. Washington stood at the podium, her son beside her, ready to turn a moment of trauma into a teachable moment about justice, courage, and the power of standing up for what's right. "Students and staff of Roosevelt Elementary," she began, her voice carrying clearly throughout the large space. "Today, something happened in our school that should never happen anywhere. A person in a position of authority used that authority to threaten and intimidate a child." The gymnasium was silent, except for the whispered conversations of younger students who didn't fully understand what had occurred. "Dr. Washington continued, her words carefully chosen to be age-appropriate, while still conveying the seriousness of the situation. "But today also showed us something beautiful about our school community. When one of our students was in danger, our teachers stood up to protect him. They put themselves at risk to keep a child safe. That's what heroes do." Spontaneous applause erupted from the audience as students and staff recognized the courage of their teachers. Dr. Washington allowed the applause to continue for several moments before raising her hand for silence. "I want every student in this school to know that you are safe here. You are valued here. You are loved here. And, if anyone, regardless of their position or title, ever makes you feel unsafe or threatened, you have the right to speak up. You have the right to be protected." She paused, looking out at the faces of the children who represented the future of their community. "We will be making changes to ensure that what happened today never happens again. We will be implementing new training programs for all safety personnel. We will be reviewing our policies and procedures to make sure they prioritize student welfare above all else." Jamir stepped forward to the microphone, his small voice carrying surprising strength as he addressed his fellow students. "I was really scared today, but my teachers made me feel safe. Mrs. Peterson, Mrs. Rodriguez, Mr. Franklin, Mrs. Thompson, and all the others stood up for me when I couldn't stand up for myself." His words brought tears to many eyes in the gymnasium as the true impact of the day's events settled over the school community. A child had been threatened, but he had also been protected by adults who put his welfare above their own safety. In the weeks that followed, the changes Dr. Washington had promised became reality. Officer Brennan was terminated from her position and faced criminal charges for assault on a minor. The district implemented comprehensive training programs for all safety personnel, emphasizing de-escalation techniques and appropriate responses to minor disciplinary issues. A new position was created within the district administration, Director of Student Safety and Welfare, responsible for overseeing all interactions between law enforcement and students. The position came with the authority to immediately remove any safety officer who violated protocols or threatened student welfare. Roosevelt Elementary became a model for other schools in the district and beyond. The incident, while traumatic, had sparked meaningful change that would protect countless children in the future. Teachers received recognition for their heroic actions, with several receiving district-wide awards for their courage and dedication to student welfare. Dr. Washington used her platform as superintendent to advocate for policy changes at the state level, working with legislators to establish clear guidelines for law enforcement interactions with minors in educational settings. Her testimony before the State Education Committee, which included video footage from the Roosevelt Elementary incident, led to the passage of comprehensive student protection legislation. The story of what happened at Roosevelt Elementary spread far beyond the district boundaries, becoming a catalyst for similar reforms across the country. Parents, educators, and child advocates used the incident as an example of what could go wrong when proper safeguards weren't in place, and what could go right when brave individuals stood up for children. Jamir returned to his normal routine within days of the incident, supported by counseling services and the unwavering love of his school community. His teachers made sure he felt safe and valued, and his classmates, many of whom had witnessed the assembly, treated him with a new respect and understanding. The math quiz that had started the entire ordeal was forgotten, replaced by more important lessons about courage, justice, and the power of standing up for what's right. Jamir continued to excel academically, but more importantly, he learned that he was part of a community that would always protect and support him. Dr. Washington often reflected on that terrible day and the changes it had brought about. While she would never wish such trauma on any child, she was grateful that her son's experience had led to reforms that would protect countless other children. The incident had shown her the importance of constant vigilance in protecting the most vulnerable members of their community. Officer Brennan's replacement was carefully selected based on her experience working with children and her commitment to positive intervention techniques. Officer Maria Santos brought 20 years of community policing experience and a genuine love for working with young people. She established mentorship programs, conflict resolution workshops, and positive behavior recognition initiatives that transformed the role of school safety officer from enforcer to advocate. The teachers who had stood up to protect Jamir became local heroes. Their story, inspiring educators across the country to remember their primary obligation to their students' welfare. Mrs. Peterson, Mrs. Rodriguez, Mr. Franklin, Mrs. Thompson, and the others were invited to speak at education conferences and training seminars, sharing their experience and encouraging others to find the courage to protect children when necessary. Principal Martinez implemented new protocols that required multiple administrators to be present for any disciplinary meeting involving law enforcement. He also established a student advocacy committee composed of teachers, counselors, and parents who could be called upon to support any student facing disciplinary action. The Roosevelt Elementary Gymnasium, where Dr. Washington had delivered her powerful speech about student safety and community protection, was renamed the Courage Hall in honor of the teachers who had protected Jamir. A plaque near the entrance reminded all who entered that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to do what's right despite that fear. Years later, when Jamir graduated from high school as valedictorian and went on to study education at a prestigious university, he would look back on that terrifying day as a turning point, not just in his own life, but in the life of his entire school community. The trauma had been real, but so had the love, support, and protection that surrounded him when he needed it most. The story of Roosevelt Elementary became a testament to the power of individuals to create change when they refused to accept injustice. It showed that one person's courage could inspire others to act, and that even the most traumatic experiences could be transformed into opportunities for growth and improvement. Dr. Washington continued to serve as superintendent for many years, always carrying with her the memory of that day when she saw her son threatened, and her community respond with unwavering support and protection. She used her position to ensure that every child in the district knew they were valued, protected, and loved, regardless of their background or circumstances. The yellow taser that had once threatened a 9-year-old boy became a symbol of what could go wrong when power was abused and authority was misused. But it also became a reminder of what could go right when brave individuals stood up to protect the innocent and demanded justice for the vulnerable. In the end, the story of Jamir, Washington, and Roosevelt Elementary was not just about one child's trauma or one officer's misconduct. It was about a community that refused to accept injustice, a mother who used her position to protect all children, and teachers who remembered that their most important job was not to educate minds, but to protect hearts. The legacy of that day lived on in the policies that protected future students, the training that prepared future officers, and the courage that inspired future advocates. It was a reminder that every child deserves to feel safe at school. Every parent deserves to know their child is protected, and every community has the power to create change when they stand together for what's right. And in the quiet moments when Dr. Washington tucked her son into bed each night, she whispered a prayer of gratitude for the teachers who had stood between him and harm, for the community that had rallied to protect him, and for the opportunity to use their experience to make the world a safer place for all children. The superintendent's child had become a symbol of hope, resilience, and the transformative power of love in action. His story would continue to inspire others to stand up, speak out, and never accept injustice as inevitable. Because in the end, every child is someone's precious gift to the world, deserving of protection, respect, and the chance to grow up safe and loved.